Welcome to another episode of The Family Business, where I'm happy to announce that I'm sitting with Zaffer Syed. I've known him for quite some time, and I thought he'd be an incredibly interesting guest. Zaffer, thanks so much for being on the show.
Oh, it's been a pleasure, Matt. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, yeah, I'm looking forward to it. So, the way I like to start is just to give people a quick snapshot of who you are. So, if you could take just a minute tops of, okay, this is what I'm doing at the moment, and this is where I live, and some just real basics, and then we could kind of get onto the fun stuff. But just so people have some context of who you are would help.
Sure. So I'm currently in Houston, Texas. I've been here for about 8 years and work with a medical device startup by the name of Serranis. We've developed a FDA-approved early kind of an intravascular bleed monitoring system. Been involved kind of since the early days. So live here in Houston. Uh, Really focused on more on clinical development marketing side of things within the startup. uh, and yeah, and also we're in the throes of fundraising, so hopefully get that behind us. But that's what's keeping me up right now.
I'll bet. So, I've always wanted to ask this question, and I don't think I've ever had a chance to get to somebody. So, you're involved so early with Serranis. Like, when did you know that you were onto something? Like, when did you stop and go, this could be it? I mean, this technology is going to change the way patients are treated. This is going to save lives. This is going to work clinically. Like, when was there a watershed moment of some kind?
Yeah, I think, so I was actually recruited into Serranos when they actually did some of the initial animal work and then early device development. So I came on board trying to better understand what kind of the clinical problem that was trying to be addressed with this particular technology. I think the watershed moment was actually being in the animal lab and having a bleed that was simulated and the device detecting, and just kind of extrapolating how that could relate out into the clinical setting. We had a couple of physicians that were really surprised on how accurate the device was able to detect this initially with this type of design, and kind of how novel it was. So I think that was kind of I would say the watershed moment that, hey, there's something here. And then subsequently, as we went through iterations of the design and then actually implementing it into the clinical study that we did, we definitely have seen where there's a real strong application. And even now that we're commercially available, we've seen instances where we've been able to detect these bleeds, and just kind of now learning from those experiences what's keeping us busy right now.
Did you have to convince anybody that was the watershed moment, or did everybody know? Was it obvious?
It's not obvious. I think when you have a novel device, I think anything that's new, you have to explain the rationale on the how as well as the why, right? I think sometimes the why can be uh, unclear for folks. This for all intents and purposes was actually very clear. I mean, the types of bleeds that we're trying to mitigate is well known, especially in the high risk procedures that we are initially addressing with this technology. These kind of large bore interventions where these patients are at a likelihood of bleeding maybe up to 18 to 20% at times. So I think the why was there. I think it's kind of communicating the how, and really clinical integration is where we have to spend some time on with clinicians, because it's new information that they're not familiar with.
So you kind of jumped in the boat with them. How'd the conversation go with your wife when you said, "Look, I'm going to go to this tiny company that has this kind of clever technology, but the average person does not understand what we're talking about"?
Yeah, I will tell you, my wife is probably more daring of the two
Is that
of
right?
us. So, if anything, she's the risk taker in the family, and I think she was all in. I think when she looks at the opportunity that kind of lies in front of us, it's that fearlessness that she's been kind of incorporating into her own kind of business. So I think it wasn't a difficult decision to convince her. I think obviously her assessment of risk is different than mine. So I think taking into the questions that she's had of how to assess the situation has been really helpful. So it was not a big deal. And I think when I first came on board, actually, I was actually asked to run the company. So it was one of those where you think of it as a career opportunity. So from where I was prior
So
to Strong.
your daughter at that point was middle school?
Yeah, she was in middle
So
school.
do you hmm, I guess every family handles it differently, but I'm curious what you do. Do you sit down with your kid and say, "Look, dad's gonna take some risk, and, nothing bad's gonna happen. We're not gonna lose our home, nothing terrible, but, I'm gonna go to a different job," or do you give her that much detail?
I don't think at that time she probably could care less. I'll tell you. I think it's one of those where she knew that it was a new job. I think it was probably a better title than what I had before. So she probably thought, hey, whatever the risk was, it wasn't really there. We never really discussed it. I think it was more of it's a new opportunity and just a new job. I mean, we've relocated and before, and she's gotten accustomed to that. Job changes. So I think yeah, I think at that age, luckily, since there was no really relocation involved, it was in town. It was not a big deal for her.
Now, so she's in high school now, and, I mean, I have a high school daughter too, and a high school son, so I'm living it. Is she driving now?
She is. We got her into driving classes. She's, I think, in Texas. It's a lot more stringent than it was when I was growing up. I think they have to do like 30 hours of supervised driving. So I think she's done like maybe 15 hours. Tough to kind of fit this all in, but she's just starting to get through that. Hopefully, we'll get a license in the fall. Um, and it's I'm the only one in the family that will ride with her. My wife is still hasn't jumped ship on that
I
yet, but
thought
I
she was the
think
risk taker. What happened?
she is, but I think when it's with her own personal life and well-being, maybe there's a little bit concern. And I think it's actually more of like, uh, not stressing my daughter out. I think
Yeah,
that's really what.
that's what I have. My wife is a cool cucumber when it comes to business. Like, she is just ice cold when it comes to making financial decisions, but when it comes to things like driving, if something bumps the car, she's like that kind of person. And my daughter's like, I can't do this. I can't drive with
Yeah,
this. I can't have this. Yeah,
yeah.
luckily I'm not that guy. I'm like, yep, yeah, you bumped that. You might not want to do that again. And
I'm probably in kind of somewhere in the middle. I'm trying not to be that guy. I do shut up when she's driving, so to kind of just let her do her thing. But I'm getting used to it. It's funny. I came from LA and coming to Houston. The driving is just it's there's a lot of challenges. So we're concerned a little bit, I will say, when she starts actually driving by herself.
is she a tennis player as well?
She's learning, trying to get out there and hit. And she did play for her team on the JV. So we'll see how she comes along. She's a runner. So
Really?
that's her thing right now. She really enjoys cross country and running. But no, I want to try to get her into tennis a little bit more so we can have more fun on the court. It's getting warmer now, but
Do you
we've
still
been
play?
out quite a bit.
Yeah, well, Houston in the summer is ridiculous. Do you still play, or have you kind of hung up your racket a bit?
It comes in cycles.
Yeah.
So over COVID, I did start playing a little bit. It's been waning a little bit just with stuff picking up, but it's one of those things I got to probably recommit to. But no, I enjoy playing tennis quite a bit. So
Yeah, no, he's being a bit humble. Everybody, Zaffer is actually an excellent tennis player. And so you played all through high school? Did you play in college as well?
no, I didn't get into college. And play. I played through middle school and high school, just kind of through tournaments and all that kind of stuff. So, but picked up a little bit more competitively in high school.
Yeah, and to make it even more interesting, Zaffer was born with an injury. Is that the term that you usually use? So it
Yeah, it was
made
a
him a little
birth
more
injury.
difficult. Yeah.
I was born with basically a brachial plexus nerve injury, so it's just a weakening of the right arm and shoulder. So I have limited mobility and movement around the arm and the fingers on the right side.
So I got to ask you, someone who played some tournament tennis myself, how do you toss the ball on a serve?
We went through a lot of different methods. One initially was actually holding the racket and the ball at the same time and throwing the ball and kind of timing the throw and then serving. But I think what ended up working out with my tennis instructor, and I became really consistent with it, was just basically placing the ball on the top of the racket and just balancing it and then just flipping it up. And I think you've seen now, I've seen some kids online doing kind of similar stuff. So,
Really?
one-handed players. But yeah, so you flick it up. And I had a really good slice. I think my consistency was placement, and I mean, my power was okay, but that's how we played. And at that time, it wasn't illegal. I don't think it's illegal, so we went with it.
They don't have a
So that
Zaffer rule in the tennis guidebook. That's amazing because I played against all kinds of kids and I've never seen anyone do that before. I've seen underhand serves, I've seen, all kinds of nonsense, but I've never seen anybody do it that way. That's amazing. I mean, the amount of practice you must have had to put in from a timing standpoint to get that right is significant. Now, I'm curious because it's something you had mentioned once in our past conversations. Did part of this injury lead you to get into biomedical engineering and the medical device community as a whole? Was that some of the impetus on why you wanted to get into healthcare?
Well, yeah, I mean, I kind of reflect on that, how I kind of, got into this. Well, I will say probably the interest in healthcare comes primarily from just, my family upbringing. So my parents came to the States early 70s. My father was a physician, like,
Okay.
a lot of South Asians at that time that needed to serve pretty much underserved areas. So we grew up in kind of a rural area in Michigan. That's where my father set practice. So I think there was an influence in healthcare and medicine, just growing up, since he was a physician in a small town. Um, but yeah, I mean, I think thinking back on kind of how I was interested in specifically biomedical engineering growing up, I had to go through some surgeries and had to meet with orthopedists and physical therapists. And a lot of the times I actually met with biomedical engineers that actually constructed customized braces. And thinking back, I think I always thought that was the coolest thing because you'd have these braces that are made of all different types of materials, some kind of plastic or metal, they're screws. And actually these braces actually help me, pick up things with my right arm that's weak. It actually allowed me to kind of function. So I think there was always a compulsion of really appreciating what those types of devices have done. And, I don't really think about it too much, but I think that did influence, my kind of educational choices. So I went into biomedical engineering when I went to college, still pursued it while I was in master's. I was always toying of whether I wanted to go to medical school, but I think the idea of just because of growing up in a family with physicians. My family did luck out with one of their kids actually becoming a doctor, so that was good. But I think no, it definitely did. I think the idea of building and something that aids people is something that I experienced myself, and consequently, I no doubt had an influence on some of the choices that I've made.
Well, you also made an interesting choice of going to get an MBA. I mean, to me, an engineer makes a conscious choice of going to the dark side and going to commercial a little bit more than product development. So I'm curious what prompted that, and you went all the way across the country to UCLA to do it. And so, where was all of the thought process there? Were you married at that point, or no?
I was married. So what happened was, so I started my career actually in California. So after grad school, I worked for St. Jude Medical in their cardiac rhythm management
Hmm.
group, and uh, I was involved in their clinical development team. So ran clinical trials, clinical studies for a number of years. And while I was there, I really was um, interested in how our clinical data was being utilized to, support education and even marketing initiatives and adoption. So there was an interest in better kind of wanting to understand how the, you know, uh, yeah, how the cookie is made, right? So in terms of what gets involved in terms of driving commercial uptake of our technology. So there was an interest then to learn about it. So UCLA had a part-time MBA program. We knew some folks that actually did it from St. Jude that actually was subsidizing some of the education. But so that's what I did. It was a 3-year program. I did it while I was married. Probably something I would never do again. To take a lot of time and effort, but I think that allowed me to kind of step out of what I was doing. Not really put myself in a niche. I mean, there was again career choices to be made at that point. Whether I wanted to pursue a full career just in clinical development and clinical research, which would have been fine. I enjoyed it, uh, but I was also piqued my interest in understanding other sides of the business, and really that's what prompted it.
So you've alluded a couple times to your wife's been heavily involved in some of the career choices you've made, but I'm curious about her. Does she have a career of her own at this point?
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you. So prior to getting married, my wife actually, had her own thing. She actually started a school, a private school herself, right out of college. She actually left that once we got married and moved to LA. But she's very entrepreneurial. I would say even more naturally entrepreneurial than I am. So she does, like I said, takes risks. She's built out a real estate business, um, pretty successful one here in Houston, right from scratch. She did some real estate prior to moving here, but she's the model that I kind of look at when I'm trying to understand, how to deal with customers, how to deal with, even challenges on building a business from the startup, from the ground up, especially, with our current startup situation. So yeah, no, she's been a natural, but she's, if anything, if she couldn't be a real estate agent, I guarantee she'd be a killer medical device sales rep.
Some people just have that. They have that in their DNA. People like them. They're charismatic. They are influential. They have a certain ability to communicate and connect with people. It's a gift. Like my dad has it. He just, whoever you are, he's all of a sudden he's in a conversation with you and you don't even know how it happened.
Yeah.
And it's just always amazing to watch, and I marvel at it because I sometimes can pull it off, but most of the time it's not as easy. It sounds
Yeah,
like it just comes easy to her.
yeah, and I think she's aggressive, and I think, but it's not she's aggressive, but not in a way that's intimidating, right? And I
Right.
think you have to make choices, you have to be transparent. I think those are the things that I kind of look to sometimes, just proving myself. But no, she's been a profound influence on some of the stuff that I've been doing here, and I think vice versa too. I mean, I mean, it's not like I think I had some some moderation balance to what she's doing, but really being in a startup environment and understanding you have to make fast decisions and being transparent with the people that you engage with. Those are definitely some of the traits that I've kind of picked up.
Well, it must be great though to be able to sit down with her and she gets it. She understands what you're going through and you understand what she's going through. It's not like she's been 13 years at GE and she doesn't have any idea what you're talking about and what you're dealing with. And I mean, that's great. Like my wife, I met in my business. So she totally gets whatever I'm dealing with. It's so easy to talk to her about it. I don't understand what she does. I try. I don't get it. She tried to explain to me a couple times. I'm like, it's just too mathematical for me. I can't. Yeah, so it's really funny. I just nod a lot and say that sounds great and don't really know what you're saying. What is the TMC Innovation Institute? What is that?
Yeah, so the Texas Medical Center, which is kind of like the property owner in a lot of the resident medical institutions that are here in kind of the heart of the Texas Medical Center in Houston. They built out an innovation space in an old building that they own. It used to be actually a cookie factory, and part of that space they've built out offices that support a lot of different life science companies. So you have J Labs, which took space there, and they're an incubator. Johnson Johnson also invested in the Center for Device Innovation, so they're housed there to support maybe some of their in-house efforts. But the TMC Innovation is a space that where they incorporated, I believe, a biodesign program similar to what they have at Stanford and other places, an accelerator. So they actually bring in companies and help provide connection support, possible access to capital, but also it's like a core curriculum that they also provide to assist, and then an incubator as well. And so our company, Serranis, went through the accelerator and is now has office space in the incubator. So it's a
Really?
really unique space in Houston where they're trying to cultivate, kind of life science and healthcare entrepreneurship. And it's been great. It's been great for us.
Yeah, I've been seeing that in Cleveland. You see that at Stanford. You see that, I know, in Carnegie Mellon, they're doing it. There's a series of universities and towns that are looking to, how do we accelerate? How do we be the impetus for people creating new technology? How do we put the physicians together with the engineers? And it's been an interesting dynamic how plenty of schools are trying to do it. Stanford seems to be setting the kind of gold standard at the moment, but I'm glad to see it. Now, so your daughter's getting to an age where you're starting to talk about her career and college and things like that. Does she take after you and your wife? Does she have that side of her that she wants to start her own business, or has she even started considering things like that?
It's, we were having those conversations. I mean, now, it's crazy. Every year it's like you got to think about the future a little bit more with these kids. But hopefully, she'll figure it out. I think there's obviously a confluence of uh, of business and healthcare kind of embedded in what she's doing. So like she has cousins and uncles and aunts that are still affiliated with healthcare, and then obviously she sees what my wife does with her business. So she's still figuring it out. I think she has kind of a tendency to like the sciences right now, which may or may not continue. I don't know. We're not pushing. She's pretty self-independent. Like, we don't really get involved in what she does in terms of her interests. But she's also, really into debate, and so wherever she lands, I think she's seen enough on our end to probably make a decision of what she wants to do, and she has enough around her, from the immediate family of what life is like to be a physician as well. So I have if I had to bet, maybe she gets into healthcare, which will be.
I'll tell you, the debate the debate kids are a blessing and a curse. They're a handful. My daughter was one for a while, and my son should be. And there are times like, just, enough. A lot of times I just say that. I'm just like, enough with this conversation. But it's also awesome that they totally feel empowered. They articulate. They feel strongly about their convictions and everything else. So how do you manage that with her? Like, at home, do you say, hey, listen, we're not in debate here. I'm trying to have a conversation with you.
Yeah, it's it is what it is. I mean, she's her mom's daughter as well. And my wife was in debate, so
Yeah.
I can't turn it off, Matt. No matter how hard I try, I would say it's one of those where, hey, if that's going to help her advance, so be it. But no, I think she's a good kid. She's actually quite caring and sensitive too. So I think she knows how to modulate that part of it, especially when she knows that it's time to lay back a little bit.
Yeah, no, well, that is an interesting conversation because kids have to almost touch a hot stove a couple times to figure out where the line is. Like, my son
Yeah.
is he's a very funny kid, but he doesn't sometimes get time and place. And I'll have to look at him and I smile at him, and he'll go, time and place. I go, time and place, bud. We're in a temple. It's not the time for dirty jokes. This is just not the time. And I'm sure the rabbi would find it funny outside, but not inside, and that kind of thing. And he just like, all right, got it. And, so, and he did it to me yesterday, not yesterday, the day before yesterday. We were somewhere and I said something funny in an inappropriate space. And he goes, hey, time and place, Dad. I'm like, you got me. You're right.
He's
Yeah,
learning.
I go, you're right. I'm out of line, and I shouldn't. It's funny. Circling back to what you said in the beginning about fundraising. So how does that translate to conversations at the dinner table? Like, do you sit down with your wife and your daughter and say, look, this is kind of what we're doing. We're trying to raise $40 million. Here's what's going on. Do those conversations come up, or is that not really what's bandied about?
It's one of those where it can get sometimes stressful, obviously. So how much do you want to kind of bring that to the table versus kind of
Yeah.
leaving it at home is one of those things that we've had to manage. But it's not something that we talk about too much. What's been helpful, at least in our case in Toronto, we brought in a new CEO, James Reinstein,
Hmm.
who's been great, and kind of offloaded that part on
Oh,
my
good.
end. I mean, obviously I'm there to help and support, so it's been a little bit less so. But we'll hopefully get to the other side of it soon. But no, I think I think going through the past 3 to 4 years of just um, doing what it takes to not just move the business but raise capital. Yeah, it surely is one of those things that comes up in a conversation, at least with my wife. I think that's probably it's one of those where yeah, it doesn't come at dinner time. It's probably right before you go to bed, or just kind of talk through things. That's probably where we would probably converse on how what she's dealing with and what I'm dealing with, and fundraising has always been things that it's top of mind for any kind of entrepreneur, especially in the startup environment. So yeah, it's been good. I mean, I think again, like I said, my wife is an entrepreneur. She has her own business, so she gets it, and it having those conversations with somebody else is only going to help you. And I'm fortunate to say that I got a sounding board for myself.
What was it like growing up in kind of rural Michigan? And you obviously aren't from American descent. And your dad is trying to be a physician, and he doesn't speak the way that everybody speaks, and certainly doesn't look the way everyone speaks. It looks like how are you guys received? How was he received as a physician at that
Yeah,
time?
it's a good question. I mean, so you don't know any better, right? So you come in. So I was born in India. My sister was too. So we both moved here. I mean, I was 2 years old. She was one. So we were literally raised here. So you don't know any better, right? So even though you may look different, we were raised American, right? So my wife did. My mom dressed traditionally. My dad was a physician. He's a psychiatrist, so he has to actually, it's especially where he has to actually speak with folks. So he was really adept at just relating with folks. And I think the idea of I wouldn't say really mixing in, but getting along with the community was important with the family, right? So we did extend out to folks that didn't look like us, and we had to, just because we were in the minority. I mean, but there was also, luckily for us, a small community of folks that were from South Asia that we that they were allowed to at least kind of conserve their culture. So it was a healthy balance. I think it's a good perspective. I mean, I always think about myself. We have family that were raised in larger cities where they had maybe a stronger concentration of similar types of people, but we didn't know any better, right? And it was actually a great place to grow up. Now that we've kind of moved out, from actually Bay City, Michigan, that's where I grew up, into larger cities. It's been nice because you kind of keep those kind of I would say values, or just kind of ways to dealing with people into kind of a more of a macro scale, especially in a city like Houston, which actually is probably one of the more diverse cities. It's actually the most diverse city in the country, I believe. So I don't know if I answered your
No, you
question, but
did, because what
wasn't
I'm
that difficult. It wasn't that difficult. I think
well,
just because the way my parents are, and kind
um,
of how.
that's good to hear. I mean, I grew up in Cleveland, Ohio, and so I agree with what you're saying, because I moved to Miami as a kid, and Miami is not exactly, they don't give you a lot of hugs down here, if you're not from down here, and if you don't pick up the pace, if you don't get your act together, if you aren't aware and tough and all these kinds of things, because Miami's like New York South. It's not the South.
Yeah.
And my family was not like that. They're pretty laid back. They're typical Ohio kind of people, and so it's very interesting to watch how my kids and my nieces and nephews are different than my brother, sister, and my parents, because they're used to being down here. But I think you're right. I think you carry a lot of that with you, and I pass down mostly to my kids about, look, when you come to a four-way stop, everybody gets a turn. That's the way it works in Ohio. Down here, it doesn't work that way. I got here. I have an important place to be. I'm going. And that's kind of how it works. And they usually give you a one-finger salute as they're going by. and that's Miami. And you're like, welcome to town. And so, yeah, so it's interesting how that is. Look, you've had this unbelievable life of education and all these other things that you've accomplished. Do you plan a lot of this out? Like, how organized are these choices that you make? I mean, you chose to get an MBA, you chose to try a startup, but is it more just happenstance and then you take the opportunity, or do you make the opportunity happen?
Yeah, I think a lot of the things that come in front of you is going to be happenstance, right? I think, for the most part, building those opportunities does get mixed in, and yeah, there were definitely decisions that made me go to LA, and allowed me to kind of build out kind of my foundation, my career there. But I think since then, yeah, no, we made discrete choices. Where they may take you, or where you end up, sometimes does have some luck, some level of luck into it, especially when there's things that are out of your control, but you got to react to it, right? So it's tough to say that it's one or the other. I've been fortunate enough to make some good choices. I mean, I've had my fair share of choices that, if you want to go back and and reevaluate. But from a career standpoint, I was pretty determined that I wanted to have a broad set of skills and exposure, even possibly at the detriment of maybe, going up the ladder sooner than later. And I think that was definitely a premeditated strategy that I had. And would it allow me to get to where I am now? Maybe not. I mean, to be honest, I mean, if there were some failures along the way, I probably would have to reset. But so I think there is some luck that there's things that you just cannot control. You just have to be prepared and maybe learn from the prior experiences that you've had. And I think growing older, I think, and having kind of those past experiences have enabled us, at least where I am with Serranis, maybe to get to a point where we feel that we are. And as I hopefully, move on from where I go, it's going to be more informed decisions that maybe kind of reduces that, that variance that could come into play, in terms of what you amount success to be, right? So,
Well, usually,
both professionally and personally.
I think this is right. I mean, usually the decisions you make that you're older are a compilation of the experiences and decisions that you made when you were younger.
Yeah.
And that's usually how you come to the conclusion. It's, inductive reasoning or inductive. Yeah, I think it's inductive reasoning. But yeah, no, that's the way I look at it too. It's funny, we think along the same lines quite a bit. Well, you've been every bit as interesting as I expected. I look forward to getting to know you more over the years because you have so much more career in front of you. And so, thank you from the family business where family's what binds us. It's been a pleasure having you on the show.
Thanks, Matt. It's been great.
All right, Zaffer. We'll see you soon.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.